May 2, 1919, Trepassey, Newfoundland. The morning after, Aroostook arrived, one of her small seaplanes was lowered into the water. It went off on a flight over the harbor and the village. For most of the people of what the Americans were already calling it, Trepassey, this was their first sight of a plane flying, and of the interest, within hours everybody in Trepassey knew that one of the pilots aboard the Aroostook was young Richard James, who had gone away to America and joined the Navy. Aroostook was refitted as an aircraft tender to support the attempt by Navy aviators to make the first crossing of the Atlantic Ocean by air. That night many of the young Americans came ashore for the first time. It wasn't exactly the kind of Saturday night port they might have wished for. But though Trepassey lacked size, its Irish stock were big on talk and warm-heartedness. The only village store was quickly denuded of its goods. Its contents weren't exactly souvenirs, but the American sailors were flush with pay and prepared to buy practically anything. Next day, Lieutenant James made the first flight of a native-born Newfoundlander over its own soil when he flew his seaplane off the bay and dipped low in salute over his cousin Bride Sutton's home. May the 10th. The first of the NCs arrived. Navy flyers scheduled a news conference for the press in the Reed Newfoundland rail car. They were welcomed by Byrd himself, who gave the opening address, where he briefly described the flight from Halifax, describing it as smooth and picture-perfect and he determined that he must be close to the Azores based on dead reckoning calculations, but a more precise estimate of their position was essential if he was to make it to their intended rendezvous site at Horden Bay.
1,300-mile first leg across the Atlantic.
Towers knew that he had no choice. He must find a suitable place to set down, but since they were still flying in thick fog, there was no opportunity to pick a preferred landing site in some protected bay. He decided that he must chance a landing in open sea. Towers headed into the prevailing wind and slowed the aircraft as much as he dared and headed down until he made visual contact. By then he realized that the seas were higher than he had estimated them to be. But by this time there was no other option other than setting the NC-3 down as softly as possible. But that was not enough. He miscalculated the flare and struck a huge wave head-on. The impact was so great that it was closely followed by a resounding crash of breaking wood. Glancing around, it was obvious in an instant that the center engine pod was badly out of alignment. The force of the impact had caused one of the main supporting struts to buckle and collapse. The crew struggled around in their cockpits trying to get a fix on the dim sun to help with their location calculations, but any thought of becoming airborne again was out of the question, regretting having left their transmitter back in Trepassey, because there was no way of communicating with the rest of the team. They could hear the chatter from the picket ships and the base ship at Horden Bay, but there was no way of telling them of their perilous predicament. Towers and his crew now knew that they were on their own, and if they were to survive they would have to nurse NC-3 along as a surface craft rather than the proud flying ship she was. They were able to calculate their present location, which they estimated to be no more than 60 miles from Horden Bay, but in these rough seas with waves running as high as 12 feet it would take all their seamanship skills to coax their crippled craft far enough to make port. There was no thought of heading into the waves, so they decided that their only chance was to run with the seas and head eastward towards Ponta Delgada.
In the 1,300-mile flight, the Navy had provided 68 destroyers along the flight path. Star shells and searchlights were the guides by night, and smoke trails were followed during the day. The trip had taken 16 hours and 49 minutes and covered the span between the Old World and the New. It was May 17, 1919. Reed had made it. Reed took off on the morning of May 27th for Lisbon, Portugal, and the completion of the Atlantic crossing, a distance of 800 nautical miles. May 27, 1919. For the first time, an aircraft had flown from the American continent to a European shore. Reed radioed back home, "We are safely across the pond. The job is finished."